Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figures or Bust podcast, the number one podcast in the world for growing your insurance business. It's episode 43, my friends. I'm Christian Brindle. I'm joined with my co-host of the show, Glen Shelton. And we got a jam-packed show for you, you guys. Let me start with this, you guys. Getting into the show. So Glen, I think we're going to take some time, read up about this.
Yes.
And talk about it more on tomorrow's show. But there seems to be some chatter. And I know we're not going to get into it much today. We talk about it on tomorrow's show. But seems to be some chatter on these Trump executive orders impacting prescription drug blends. I don't know anything about this yet. But it's interesting to kind of see the chatter going on amongst it. Maybe we dive into this and pick it up in the morning tomorrow on tomorrow's show. But it's interesting to think about all the domino effects of something like that.
There's a lot to unpack, and I honestly, genuinely don't understand how. Because again, this is my understanding is that the Inflation Reduction Act got passed by Congress. So legislature voted, passed, it became law. So I don't understand how this affects what Congress passed. Again, this is my understanding. And Trump signing this executive order that basically said, hey, pharmaceutical companies, you're good to go, baby. You don't need to cap those prices. Charge as much as you want. Free market, capitalism, let's go. So I don't understand how this plays out yet. I think a lot of people don't understand. I'm seeing a lot of confusion and kind of public questioning. So yeah, I think tomorrow, or maybe we might even need more time to see, but this is something we're actively keeping an eye on, you guys, because this is just the start, right? This is just going to be the start of probably a lot of potential changes. I have Mehmet behind me. Hi, Mehmet. We're waiting for you, bud. We're waiting for you. So
if you're interested in kind of hearing what's going on with this situation, I'll research it. I'll read about it. We'll both read about it today. We'll address it on tomorrow's pod because I definitely think it's definitely newsworthy. To start off this show, though, the first topic of the day is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency conversation, just ever so slightly. Before we get into the main topic, which is telesales versus face-to-face sales as an agent, okay? You see Trump put out his own coin.
Yeah. I actually retired.
What were your thoughts on this?
I put all my money into Trump coin, hold it out, and I can retire now, you guys. This might be my last podcast that you hear from me.
You heard it here first. I will be solo running the company.
That's right. No, I heard about it because I want to say it was I think it was like Friday night, early Saturday morning that this Trump coin got released, which again, you guys, if you don't know anything about cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, Bitcoin was one of the original cryptocurrencies. Since then, there has been a plethora of other cryptocurrencies that have launched. Bitcoin has some validity behind it in the sense of how many people own it, and how few coins can exist out in the marketplace. So as a store of value, similar to gold, right? Digital gold is how a lot of people look at Bitcoin. What I've experienced and kind of seen, and I've bought cryptocurrency over the years. I do think there is some validity to the use of Bitcoin as of right now, as a store of value like gold. When it comes to some of these other cryptocurrencies that have launched, there have been all sorts of different things I've seen happen. There's been some cryptocurrencies launched that have been a total scam, where they're just trying to, it's a Ponzi scheme, I think would be the best way to explain it, right? Mm-hmm. You launch a meme coin, as the kids say. You launch this meme coin, a new coin. You get a bunch of people to put their money in, and then you own most of the coins. You pull all your coins out,
right?
Yes, yes. You can see this has happened in the stock market, right? Over and over. This happens in other ways. With the Bernie Madoff investment scandal, right? That
Yeah.
that had nothing to do with cryptocurrencies, but it was the same. It's all the same playbook, right? You know, you tell people what a great investment. People put their money in, and then you pull all the money out, and then nobody gets their money out of the investment.
Yeah.
There's also been, on the flip side, I will say there's been some validity of some of these other smaller coins where they're trying to solve a technological problem using blockchain technology, which I do think there's a lot with blockchain technology that's super interesting, where you're using a token system to authenticate digital transactions. And as we become this digital world where so much is happening online, financial transactions, NFTs were really big, right? Which is almost like how can you tokenize like art essentially, or something that's not financial.
That had a nice 6 weeks, didn't
it? So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Trump coin specifically, though? I mean, what do you think?
And I didn't love it. I hesitate to even touch this too closely, right? Because of the political backlash I always seem to receive anytime I go anywhere near this.
Bye. Christian says bye, guys. No. Go buy your Trump coin.
I didn't love seeing it, right? Like, and it's interesting, right? Like how many celebrities over the past couple of years have put out their coins, and it's ended up being kind of like, a lot of them ended up being like shams, like Andrew Tate put out a coin in the last year, and previously to that, he was just roasting people that would put out coins. He was like, I will never put a coin out. I will not scam my fans. And then like within a year, there's a coin, I think a lot of them that are put out by celebrities are just exactly what you said. On the surface, it seems from the outside looking in that their insider group or them themselves own a vast majority of the coins available, right? Because they're limited in quantity. And they pump them up, they appreciate in value, they dump them. They make a nice chunk of change right on the way out. Everybody else, though, it's not on the inside, ends up losing their shorts a little bit. Bitcoin is one that's definitely interesting to me. I rewind back to 2019. I told this story on YouTube video that we put out on the channel over this past weekend, talking about stock investing and things like that. But for those of you that didn't catch that video, in 2019, I started experimenting investing with stocks. Ended up selling the entire portfolio, putting it all in the business. It was a great move. The business did great, grew substantially. But now I've gotten kind of back in a little bit in terms of just on a personal investment side. And in 2019, I was pondering buying a Bitcoin at that time. I was this close. Bitcoin at the time was about $5,000 a coin. And, people always say, well, you could have bought it at the beginning for 50 cents a coin or whatever it was.
Right.
Sure. But like, let's be honest, right? None of us even knew it existed. I didn't, certainly at that time.
I never
did. You did?
Yes.
And you didn't buy it?
I'll talk about my story
in 2010. Okay, I want to hear
2009. 2009.
Okay. I want to hear this. So,
I might start crying, but we'll talk in a second.
So anyway, I was this close, right? I was this close. I have a vivid memory of having it in front of me on my Robinhood account, and not doing. I don't use Robinhood anymore, by the way.
Thank goodness.
But at that time, beginner. And if you look at Bitcoin today, right, it's trading over, like north of $100,000 now, right? And a lot of analysts expect it to go, that there's a real possibility that will appreciate up to 200,000 a coin.
$1 million a coin, I've even heard.
Okay, I haven't heard.
Have said.
I've heard from a lot of places the 200,000 a coin by the end of the year is where I was going with this.
Okay.
Long term, that wouldn't surprise me. And so it's interesting, right? Like I wanted to be into it because I'm like, all right, I think I missed the boat here. So I started buying shares of a fund
An ETF?
An ETF that owns Bitcoin.
With IBIT? IBIT?
That is it.
Oh, I was just looking at IBIT last week, bro. That's a great one. Look at you.
And so,
what did you get in at on IBIT?
I will tell you. Hang on.
20? Did you get in the 20s?
No. I think it was like low 50s.
That's so great. That's a great. I love this play because I think it's a safer crypto investment, in my opinion. I was talking to my family member who does a lot in the crypto world about IBIT, and he was like, "That's pretty." He was almost disappointed because the risk is so low, but I'm like, "That's exactly what I want to hear." I'm like, "That's exactly what I would want to hear." Like,
so 51 a share, 52 shares.
That's a great entry point because I think it'll hit. I think it'll hit 100 this year, at least.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pivot back. You were aware of Bitcoin in 2009.
I was.
At whatever it was at that time, right? Less than pennies, I'm sure.
It was, yeah.
Walk us through this journey, if you will, because I'm fascinated by this. You might be the first person I've ever personally known
really
told me that they knew about it. Yeah. In 2009, I don't know. I can't think of anyone. If anyone's watching on any platform, drop it in the chat for sure.
Yeah. What's funny is my nephew did a school. He was interviewing. He did an interview with me for school, and it was like one of the questions he interviewed me was like, "What's one of your biggest regrets?" This is one of my lifetime biggest regrets, without a doubt.
Yeah,
without a doubt, this is one of my lifetime biggest regrets. It was summer before my freshman year of college, 2009. I vividly remember I had an HP laptop. At the time, it wasn't like the latest and greatest tech, but it was a decent laptop for the time being. I remember being later in the evening, later at night. Bitcoin had come across my radar. I'm trying to remember how. I don't know if I can even tell you exactly how I initially heard about it. But Bitcoin started to, I don't know, was it 2009 or 2007 when Bitcoin officially, it was somewhere in there. Maybe it was 2009 actually when Bitcoin officially launched. But at the time, I remember thinking that, okay, this is interesting because it has value. It has like actual monetary value. And what interested me the most is people were talking about mining. And I was like, oh man, maybe I can set up my laptop so it can just start mining coins for me. And, I don't have to do anything. And even though it's only worth, pennies per coin right now, maybe long term, this would be actually worth something. At the time, I remember thinking that maybe Bitcoin becomes like a universal digital standard for video games. That was what I thought it would kind of become. I thought video games would adopt cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and everyone would have like a digital transaction. I don't know if that was my idea or if there was some mumblings of that becoming a thing, but that was kind of what I thought would happen, is that this digital currency would become the US dollar of the digital world. I got a wallet set up, downloaded a wallet.
Wow.
I had a wallet, summer of 2009. I had a wallet downloaded on my computer. Could not figure out how to get the mining going. And it was something I played with for a few nights and just let it go. I was just like, oh, well. And I thought a lot about it. I'm like, well, what would have happened? What would have happened if I had cracked that?
At that point in time, if you had to guess, how much at that point in time, being a college student, basically, could you have put into it if you had got it to work?
I didn't have any money. I had zero money. But what I could have done is mining. So if you understand Bitcoin, mining, when you're essentially using a computer to help these tokens get authenticated. Okay. Over time, mining for Bitcoin, authenticating these tokens has gotten incredibly difficult. And you get just a tiny, tiny bit for doing it, right? It's almost like that's part of how the service works, right? Is You use your computer, you're using your computer power to authenticate the token as the transaction happens. And in return, you get a tiny bit. Well, early on in 2009, I'm assuming I probably could have gotten multiple Bitcoins for doing the mining, for doing the authentic, because there was nobody was doing. So I could have just used my computer, had this mining software going. I could have probably had thousands of coins over a few months.
Oh, wow.
Now without any financial investment besides the power of my computer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. I don't know how I never knew this. It's like I don't know who you are, honey.
You don't.
I don't know who you are.
What else haven't you told me?
What else have you kept from me, dear? Yeah, I think it's that's fascinating. I think to kind of wrap up this topic and get to the topic at hand, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to me. I think cryptocurrency, from everything I know about it, which is not a ton in comparison, you know much more about it than I do, but it seems like it is not super regulated at this point in time. There's a lot of abuses, a lot of scams, pump and dump things like we've talked about. A coin like Bitcoin that's been around for so long, right? And it was kind of the OG, if you will. There's been speculation on it for, I mean, if you're talking 2009, I mean, we're talking 15 years ago. There's probably been speculation throughout this entire period of time. But now it's getting to the point where it's like mainstream market analysts seem to be bullish on it, which is super interesting to me. Yeah.
Well, you also have countries that have adopted it as their currency.
Right.
I think was it Venezuela?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of really small countries that inflation essentially destroyed their national currency, and they said, we're going to Bitcoin because we screwed up so bad. So that's fascinating to think about too. Now, mind you, that happened years ago, and I don't feel like it's moved the needle as much as some people said it would. A lot of people said the second one country adopted, other countries would adopt, and it would just kind of explode. But I don't think we've seen quite that. But, what happens if a major country that follows suit?
Yeah.
That would be wild.
The United States. Ooh. I remember in 2017, living in Florida, there was a convenience store near my house I go to all the time. And it was shocking to me at that point in time because they had a Bitcoin like dispenser or something.
A kiosk.
Yeah. At that point in 2017, I was like,
yeah, that's early.
I remember thinking like, I'm like, well, damn. I'm like, this thing is really taking off. This thing is really getting popular. I started seeing them more and more. And that was 8 years ago. I mean, it's amazing to think. It's definitely been volatile, right? It's had its points where it's been at 50, 60K, and then it falls down quite a bit, and then it goes back up.
Yeah.
Like probably a majority of investments, stocks,
right,
real estate based on interest rates, property values, things like that. But it'll be interesting to kind of see where it goes. But I'm very bullish on long term it really being worth a lot. And so, but I don't have the cojones right now to buy one at this current price. It's scary. I could do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm settling for the EFT.
I like the EFT play, or the EFT play ETF. It's ETF.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
EFT.
I was like EFT.
We were talking about EFT earlier.
I like the ETF.
Yeah, the ETF.
I think that's a more conservative option that you can buy into without getting directly into the crypto market. I think this administration is going to be very crypto friendly, as we've seen with the president rolling out his own coin. So
what a conflict of interest.
I'm super bullish. I'm scared. Yeah, I'm scared to put money into it because, again, it is very up down, and it's a 24-hour cycle. It's not like the stock market where there's like these structured times when it's active. Like, it is just happening all the time, 24/7. The other thing I wanted to mention really fast that I didn't say yet is Russ Albright, who was the founder of the Silk Road, just got pardoned by President Trump. And the rumor on the street is he's a billionaire because he supposedly had so many Bitcoins at the time. Again, this is like 15 years, 12, 15 years ago. I think it was 2012, 2013. So, Bitcoin was worth 80 to $100 when he got busted, and supposedly he didn't share his codes, right? So supposedly he has wallets with who knows how many Bitcoin. So I think it's very interesting. I think everyone should keep an eye on this. Yes.
Agreed. I think it's something to watch.
Yes.
Let me quickly talk to you guys about this episode's sponsor, and that is Lead Heroes, you guys. Lead Heroes is your one-stop shop when it comes to high-quality, exclusive, FCC compliant, one-to-one consent compliant lead sources. There's a sale going on right now at the time of this episode airing. You can, if for a minimum of 25 leads or more, you can get turning 65 leads right now for $25 a pop. Head over to leadheroes.com. Again, that's leadheroes.com, and make sure that you take advantage of that sale before it's gone. Glenn, when is the last day of said sale?
It expires Tuesday, January 28th at midnight. So we are less than a week until this promotion's gone, you guys. Definitely take advantage of it. Or it could also sell. We've also had this happen before last year where the turning 65 leads just sold out. We can only generate so many of these per area, per state, per agent. They are 100% exclusive, like Christian said. We're not we're not reselling. We're not sharing these leads. So, it could sell out before then, but if it doesn't sell out, we're offering these until midnight, January 28th. Take advantage while you can.
Yes. All right. Let's shift gears into the main topic at hand.
Yes.
And a juicy topic at that, right? Face-to-face insurance sales versus telesales. Okay, so where do we begin? I've said this multiple times on this podcast this year. How do you indeed eat an elephant? And this is indeed a big, fat, honking elephant of a topic. And we need to eat it.
Sizzle reel of just you saying some of these crazy words. maybe we'll get Jake to create a sizzle reel here at the end of the month. This is sizzle reel of you
saying crazy shit on
saying
the podcast.
Crazy shit. Yeah. What is going on right now?
All right, Glenn, talk to us. Right, telesales versus face-to-face sales. What is the first thing that pops into your mind when we talk about this?
The very first thing that pops into my mind is the virtual happy hour that we did during COVID. That's the very first thing that pops into my mind. Yes.
For any listeners, because this goes on a lot of different platforms, right? For any listeners that might not know what we're talking about, rewind 2020. Shutdowns were happening. Some states were banning, some departments of insurance were banning insurance agents from even going to people's houses.
Yes.
And at that point in time, it was in the early days of me creating our very popular online Facebook group community of Medicare specialized insurance agents, 7-figure Medicare agent. And to kind of keep everybody sane, we started doing these things called virtual happy hours where, on a Friday night, a Saturday night, a bunch of us at times, 10, 20, 30 of us would get onto a Zoom meeting, have some drinks, talk about the industry, but also shoot the shit a little bit. And, it's kind of a fun little thing. We've done a handful here and there since that, but they were really legendary during the pandemic. Sorry, continue.
They were. Yeah, there was an extra special. Like we've done some, I feel like, since. Doesn't quite hit the same. We should probably we're overdue, I think, to do another. But to get back to the story I was referencing is this came up during one of our virtual happy hours. We're on Zoom. It wasn't a huge group at the time. Again, I'm PST, so I always felt like by the time I got my kids in bed and I could hop on, I felt like I missed half of it. But there was some yeah, I know. Okay. The FOMO was real, but there were some of you out there, you guys were soldiers. You're still on there. It's late East Coast time. We probably had 20 people, 15 people. It wasn't a huge group, but this topic came up. And initially it was kind of being discussed in a friendly manner, and then it got kind of combative. And
to say the least.
But the irony is that I feel like this topic always gets combative when you really get into it. When you have people who they believe so much in their side that when anyone's talking about the other side, it's like Republican versus Democrat. It really will get that much of a clash from agents, and I find it hilarious. And I've, being in the industry as long as I have at this point, I have seen really the full circle of the growth on both sides. When I first came in 2012, 2013, very few people were selling over the phone. Almost everyone was selling face to face. The industry wasn't really structured or set up for telesales. You had to be very specialized, or you had to really be in a call center environment back then, between the technology, the carriers, the processes, the products. It just wasn't really set up for it. And then slowly over time, it started to become more of a thing. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, all of a sudden the carriers were scrambling, trying to figure out, well, how do we do this? Okay, you guys can sell Medicare Advantage from home. We're going to let you do that from home. That's fine. You can do it over the phone because we don't want you going to people's houses. And now it's, from there, that was a huge jump off point where it's accelerated a ton. So that's the first thing I think of, though, is that conversation on Zoom where, here we are, we're in the pandemic. It's a year or so into it. And there were several people fighting for telesales versus really just this one person who was trying to add. One person was advocating for face-to-face. And then there was 5 of us taking turns. Just, it's no, telesales is better. Yeah. What are you saying? No.
Yeah. And
what do you think of first, though?
I mean, so I think of almost the trajectory, right? So when I first came in 2014, selling Medicare Advantage in particular was rather difficult over the phone. And not only was it difficult, it was one of those things that was a very gray area, right? A lot of the people that were doing telesales at that point in time, some of the early adopters of it, people shout out Chris Westfall was somebody that really kind of pioneered selling Medicare products over the phone. He was the first person that I was aware of that was doing it in a large scale and a big volume. But most of those people were selling Medicare supplements at that point in time. It was almost like at some point in time, there were rules to prevent you from selling Medicare Advantage over the phone, but it was those rules had kind of been relaxed, but it was kind of such a gray area. And so if you were to do it, you would have to mail signature pages to people and have them send them back, basically, because there was very few. I can't remember if even any major carrier at that point in time that we worked with had an electronic application process in 2014 for Medicare Advantage. Maybe there's one I'm forgetting, but when I came in, I was taught to do face-to-face sales, and I was taught to do paper apps for Medicare Advantage in particular. I remember Equitable Life and Casualty on the Med Sup side had this telephonic app where you could do a 3-way call in with an underwriter, which nowadays is very standard, right, with a lot of products and carriers. But at that point in time, I was like, wow, I was like, no paper, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So I think about that. I think about, carriers started to bring out electronic application tools, which was game-changing at the time. And then what was even more game-changing was products like Sunfire and Connecture coming out that became almost universally adopted from FMOs and agents and things like that. Pretty much every agent will use one of those two tools. Most of you that are watching that don't know what Sunfire Connector is, you probably use them if you do electronic applications. It's probably just some white labeled version of it from your FMO, and they call it something else. Like Medicare Hub, Medicare Express, but it's really Sunfire. It's just with a white labeled version. And I think those things, those technological advances from the carrier side and then from those third parties really changed the game. Now that being said, right, let's kind of talk about this episode of the 7 Figures or Bust podcast is brought to you by my mini course, How to Find and Buy Books of Businesses. Guys, in 2024, Glenn and I, in our combined company, purchased and acquired through acquisition 900 clients. And over the years, we've purchased thousands of clients to grow our agency internally. And we've learned a thing or two over the years, right? There's certain things you need to look out for. You need to know how to value a book of business. You need to know how to transfer everything, what the expectations are in terms of the timeline. And you need to know how to put a deal together and structure it to protect yourself while still at the same time doing good business with people. Guys, this mini course is around 10 videos long. It's a quick and easy thing to get through. And it's a great way for you to grow your book of business in 2025. Whether you're finding an agent that is maybe been in the business for decades and they want to retire, and then maybe they don't have any kids to take over their business. Maybe you're looking at a situation with an agent that just hasn't been able to make it in the business and they're just looking to go off and try other things. Buying books of businesses can be a great way to quickly and rapidly grow your business fast. And we've unveiled all of the little tools and tricks that you need to know in this training. It's a one-time purchase for only $197. For that price, we're practically giving it away. Make sure to check it out now. Now back to the show. The pros and cons of both. Let's give both a very fair shake here. So for me, I look at, I did nothing but face-to-face sales for probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that. I never did anything but those. Yeah. And I sat at the kitchen table and, I drove all over the state of Utah. I've been everywhere here. I know this state so well because I don't know how many appointments I've been on at people's homes. That's what I did. And I think the pros of face-to-face is it's harder for someone to reject you than it is over the phone.
Yep.
Right? It's more difficult for someone to kick you out of their house than it is to hang up on the phone with you. Right?
Yep.
So once you're in the house, I believe that most people just in a vacuum will have a higher closing percentage than they will over the phone typically. Just because it's harder to throw you out. It's, they want to be polite, and I think there's also a personal aspect to it, right? I think a lot of people like personal aspect. I think the cons, of course, of face-to-face sales are it's inefficient from the standpoint of all the windshield time you need to put in order to make it work, right? And people might say, oh, well, I'll just work in my local area. I said the same thing. It never is that easy, right? If you're a face-to-face model exclusively and you're going to people's homes, now you can do face-to-face where they come to you, but you're going to find that, people will come to you, but if you're not willing to do a telephonic appointment with them and you have that model, you're going to have a fraction of the people that will actually be willing to come to you. And they have to be close enough, right? So a lot of times if you're doing face-to-face, most people go to the client. They go to the house. So you have a lot of windshield time, that could be completely avoided by doing telesales. I think on the telesales side, I think the pros are it's really, really efficient. You can hit, let's say you go out in an appointment, right? Say you're driving 30 minutes away. And you're going to houses that are all in relative area to each other. But by nature, a face-to-face appointment in someone's house is going to take longer, usually, than a telephonic appointment. Because the people get chatty in their own house. They're comfortable. They're like, this quilt was made by my Aunt Berta. And it's from World War I. I'm like, wow. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, I gotta fucking go. I got another appointment, but you don't get as much of that on the phone, like I feel like the appointments are easier to wrap up and it's a little harder to get out of the house. So there's an efficiency side of it. You have shorter appointments by nature. You have windshield time that's saved. I think the con of it is you have to be a good telesale. You have to be a good salesperson for one. I think you can be a mediocre salesperson and make sales face to face.
I agree.
Over the phone, people, like I said, it's easier for people to reject you. It's easier for people to hang up on you. And you really have to nail vocally everything you're doing on that telephonic appointment, right? You have to nail what you're saying, your scripts, your tonalities, everything, because you're losing out on so much communication that you get when you're in person with someone. I've talked about this a lot, right? Like eye contact, body language, you're smiling, you're not smiling. All of that is communication that's not verbal. You lose all that over the phone. So you have to really nail your tones and how you're pronouncing things and how you're sounding, your energy, everything. But if you can master that, you can sell a lot of business and it's an efficient thing, right? So that's kind of like my synopsis, I think, of the pros and cons. What did I miss?
It's funny, as I kept thinking about how many Little Spoon collections I saw in these
My
homes.
mom has one of those.
I have this vivid memory of, seemed like every third or fourth house I was in. Mrs. Jones, Susie Senior, she's got the Little Spoon collection. It's like a state spoon collection. I don't know. I was always fascinated by it because I didn't understand. First of all, why are we collecting mini spoons? Second, why are we hanging that on the wall? Why isn't that? I didn't get that. But
I'll have my mom call you and explain.
Tell your mom to take a picture. Post it in the group. Tell your mom to take a bit. I want to see it. I want
next time I'm at her house, I will take it for you.
Yeah, take a picture, post it, and be like a staple in every boomer's house. I don't get it.
I think with the spoons, it's almost like a collection of where you've been.
Okay.
Because the spoons come from various places, right? Like your Yellowstone National Park spoon, your Glacier National Park.
So they're not buying it as a set. They're actually collecting it state by state.
Yeah, like area by area, like places they're traveling and things like that.
That's fair. That's cool. Okay.
So, you're like, I get it now.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm ready to go back in the field now. So what 80% of communication's body language. That's the stat I've heard. I believe that to be true. If you're face to face with someone, you're talking to them, you're trying to sell something to them. It's, what are their eyes doing? Are their arms crossed? Are they facing you? There's so much nonverbal communication happening that you're not getting in a telesales setting. So that is like the core difference, in my opinion, when you really boil this down of like, what's the difference? It is significantly easier to communicate with someone face to face. It is much more difficult to communicate with someone over the phone. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean you can't have a system in place where you are crushing telesales. I think from an efficiency standpoint, and if we go back to the Zoom call, the happy hour Zoom call that, we're all kind of fighting about this, my stance was that mathematically it is more efficient to sell over the phone. And if you really get down to the dollars and cents, when it's, how many prospects can I present to in a day? And even if telesales is less efficient, even if I'm closing 50% less, if I can have 400% more presentations, I am going to win every single day. Absolutely. That's the basic math where I'm always like, I don't know. I don't understand how we can really compete. And again, I was a face-to-face agent for years, just like Christian mentioned, his first 5 years was selling in the field. I sold exclusively face-to-face for my first 3 years. Did very little of actual telesales until the very end of me actually writing business. But again, being a call center owner and working with other call centers, I can tell you from an efficiency standpoint, even if you're closing, let's say you're in the field, you're closing 30%. Let's say you're closing 1 out of every 3 houses you're getting into, which is, that's good. Maybe even a little above average. 1 out of 3, we'll say, just for round numbers. It's probably going to be 50% or even potentially less, 60% of that you're actually, or 40% of that you're actually going to see convert if you're selling over the phone. Mm-hmm. But you can only get in as an agent who tried to maximize my day. It was almost impossible for me to run more than 12 or 14 appointments in a day. If I spent literally all day in the field and I was running appointments from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., there was no way I could really do more than 12 or 14 appointments. So, yeah. And at 12 to 14 appointments, I'm probably only making 8 to 10 presentations. If you're selling over the phone, you can 100% do more than that. Let's say I was doing 8 presentations on a day that I am working 14 hours. If you're selling over the phone for 14 hours, you can probably make 20 to 30 presentations or more. So again, it's just, if you're going to double or triple the number of presentations you're making when you're working on it per day, the numbers just follow that. You close half, you present 3 times as much, your ROI is higher. And that's what I always get stuck on when this conversation comes up.
I think the way I look at it, for anybody that's asking which is better, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, like we've both kind of laid out, there is pros to both, right? Like if you are a new agent and you're starting out and maybe you're struggling making phone calls, right? Because I know when I first started, I was wet behind the ears. I was very green. My first probably 6 months, I struggled. Maybe not that long. Maybe 3 or 4 months, I struggled making calls. It was kind of like a nervous, anxiety riddled thing for me. And the way I got through it is I just powered through it, made myself do it, recorded myself calling, revamped my script. I worked incredibly hard. I studied my craft and tried to become a master at my craft. But if you're a new agent and you're just starting out and maybe you're struggling to make calls, which I know a lot of agents, this is the thing for them, right? Yeah. Like this is the case for them. It might not be such a bad idea to make calls to people that are not too far from you, 30 minutes or less. And you're making a call with the intention of scheduling an appointment instead of doing the appointment over the phone and getting out into the field.
Pause for a second. There's a comment here I want to interject. It's right with what you're talking about.
Okay.
Sarah says the recording part still freaks me out. What if I screw up? What would you say to that?
Sure. Okay. Let me circle back on that because I think it ties into what I'm saying here. I think if you're new and maybe you're just struggling over the phone, right? Like I've talked to agents that will strike out on their, on their first 30 appointments, 40 appointments, things like that. They just can't seem to get a deal done.
Yeah.
Getting out into the field to start out to get your feet wet is not a bad thing. Right. I believe that. I've told a lot of new agents that maybe you should start going face-to-face if you're having anxiety over the phone. Maybe make a call to schedule an appointment and go to them. I'm going to be out in your area, Mrs. Jones. That's probably a topic for another podcast. But to get your feet wet, that can be helpful. Now, I think about myself as an agent. I did very well doing face-to-face. I was a top producer doing face-to-face, but my best years personally producing were over the phone when I stopped going to houses. My efficiency increased so substantially. And that to me is my thought process on which one is better. Now, which one's best for you at this point in your career might be a different conversation. So circling back to the question, right, about,
what if I screw up?
About screwing up, recorded calls, things like that. That is definitely a con as well to telesales, is you have to record all your calls, you have to save them, and if you have an allegation, you have to supply them, right? Whereas face-to-face, It's more of like, this is my version of it, this is their version of it, that kind of thing. Of course, you should always do your best, but like when you're first starting out, you're learning. It's natural that you make a mistake, that kind of thing. I think that there's no way to really completely avoid that. When you are new, you are going to make mistakes.
Yes.
Period. And the only way to get around those mistakes is to do what I just said a second ago. Record your calls, listen to your calls, go through and study what you're doing, study sales.
Talk to your upline.
Talk to your upline. Send calls to your upline. We have agents of ours that send calls to me. They're like, how do you think I did on this call? And I try to coach them through it. To the best of my abilities. And, I think that's the way you're going to go through it. Now, if you're really concerned about that, starting face-to-face to get the jitters out and to get some experience under your belt might not be the worst idea, right?
Correct.
But you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into a lifetime career of face-to-face like a lot of agents do. And then they feel like they can't do telesales. Telesales is a great thing, but I understand from the perspective of a new agent, especially in this hyper compliance world we live in right now. You make a mistake, you say something wrong, you have to record it, you have to document it. And in the case of an allegation, you're rapidly at a disadvantage opposed to face-to-face in terms of proving your point. So that would be my thought on that, right? If you're really concerned about that, maybe cut your teeth running some face-to-face. Get your confidence up, write some apps, get some experience under your belt, and then slowly but surely transition into over the phone. But it is a far gone conclusion. I think, the best thing a new agent can do is just accept it. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
Trying to find, a perfect mix to where you're trained enough, you're prepared enough, enough to not make a mistake is impossible. You can't learn everything you need to know without doing to avoid mistakes.
There's also like no such thing as like this perfect phone call either. Right. So like, don't hold yourself to the standard of like, oh my, I have to read the SOA part of the script word for word. And if I miss one word or if I transpose two words, I'm going to jail. Right. Which some of you have this type of mindset. Some of you have this type of mindset where you think CMS is going to knock on your door if you mess up a few words.
Struck by lightning.
And don't let that fear drive you. Like, don't let that fear keep you from getting on the phone or being successful. I genuinely believe if you are trying to do what's best for that Medicare beneficiary, and that is your focus, even if you do mess up on the phone, even if you do have to send a recording in that's not perfect, you have nothing to worry about, in my opinion.
I think.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to add to that. Like, oftentimes, if you have an allegation and they're reviewing a call or anything like that, they're looking at your intent first and foremost.
Right.
It's been my experience. I've seen situations where we've had allegations internally. Every time I say that, people are like, you had an allegation, you're a bad agent. No, if you have never had an allegation, you haven't written enough business.
Yeah. 100%.
Because no matter how good you are, no matter how good of an agent you are, no matter how ethical you are, you have things that are outside of your control.
Yes.
Where we're dealing with seniors. I say it all the time. So you have people that are forgetful. They're embarrassed about something. Like they'll throw you under the bus.
Yep.
Even if you did nothing wrong. I have some crazy allegation stories I've told on the show before. I'll save them for another day. But like most of the allegation stories that I've had against either me or one of our internal agents on our team have been wild. We had one last year where one of our internal agents wrote an app for someone, and she left us a Google review mentioning the plan she had, we put her on, and how much she loved it and how, professional we were, and we covered all the bases, everything like that. Then like 2 or 3 months later, she filed an allegation saying she didn't know what plan we were putting her on. So we submitted a screenshot of the Google review of her talking about the plan we put her on. And that, it was one of the fastest ones I've ever seen come back and been like, you're good,
Yeah.
But like, it's intent is very big. And so I think if your heart's in the right place and you're really looking to serve that member and do what's best for them, that is going to show through on your phone call.
Yeah. A couple things from what we were talking about with, this face-to-face tells it. So one is, Christian mentioned how he's driven all over the state in order to sell face-to-face. If you are a full-time agent selling face-to-face and you are doing a lot of marketing that's, direct mail or whatever type of marketing you're doing, a lot of times your local area, your response rate will go down. They'll hit a saturation point with your marketing where you have to start to travel in order to continue to get a response rate. Depending on where you live, that can make things really difficult for you. If you live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and your local market's starting to dry up and they're not responding to whatever type of marketing you're doing, obviously you can diversify your marketing. That's one strategy. But a lot of times you just end up having to travel. You're going to have to start driving. And if you have a less densely populated area, that can be pretty problematic as a face-to-face agent. Yeah. I have the same story as Christian. I've driven all over the state from, Eugene all the way to, Olympia, Washington, really covering almost 2 states to sell life insurance because direct mail was what I was using at the time. And I had to go where the leads were. So I've seen this firsthand with some absolute beast face-to-face agents where they're driving all over the place to stay busy 24/7, 52 weeks a year. So that's one thing that can be really problematic with face-to-face sales, that if you're selling over the phone, you can get a license in 3-4 states. You have all these different people to market to. A lot of times your CPL, your cost per lead, will go down because you have a bigger audience. You can constantly kind of move around without physically moving around. That's a huge advantage that you get with telesales. I do want to reiterate here too, it is personal preference at the end of this conversation here. We're getting towards the top of the hour already. Christian already kind of mentioned this. We can't tell you what's best for you. We can tell you, what's best for other agents, other agencies. We can go through the math on, how telesales can potentially net you more money. But at the end of the day, you might not be a telesales agent. You might be a face-to-face agent or vice versa. And you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. One last tidbit I want to share here is I used to work with one of the most, this final expense agent wrote some of the most business that I'm aware of on his own pen. It was over $500,000 in premium on his own pen in a year. Whew. So there's only a handful of people I'm aware of that have ever even come close to that. I mean, you're talking about, $50,000 in premium a month. You have to be just out of your mind to write that type of business. Yes. And they did that. They were writing a huge volume of business for years. They hit this crescendo of that $500,000 in a year mark, over $500,000 in a year mark. And then they were pivoting to telesales, and this agent was struggling. They just really couldn't figure it out. And ultimately they ended up going back into field sales, and this was later in the game. This was like 2018, 2019. Final expense was being sold over the phone by a lot of people. And they thought because they were an expert of field sales that they could just jump on the phone and start selling over the phone and everything would translate. And it did not. It did not for this person. So, I share that story. We're talking about going into the field to get your feet wet, selling over the phone. I love that strategy. I think that's a legitimate strategy. But at the end of the day, you might be the best field agent in the world, and you might pick up the phone and really struggle, and that's okay. That's okay. You can keep selling face to face. That's not going anywhere.
Right. There are differences for sure, and I think I know for me, I had a bit of an adjustment period where I struggled at first switching to over the phone, because you're so used to all of the communication in a face-to-face appointment that's not verbal, that we've talked about on this show. You're so used to, showing a presentation, like showing a pamphlet, walking down the pamphlet with your finger. Like you're used to all these little aspects of it that you've become almost surgical at, right? You've done it so many times, right? It's just like, it's muscle memory. And I feel like the longer you go doing face-to-face, the harder it is to transition. I've seen that with agents too, where they're just really good face-to-face and they try to switch. For me, it was tough at first too. It was tough.
Yeah.
I had a couple of instances where I would try telesales. At first, maybe I'd struggle for the first little while. So then I'd go back into the field. I do that for a few more months, go back to telesales, try it again. Took me a few times of really going back and forth before I really started to figure it out. And again, I think a lot of it was just reps. It was reprogramming my process, just not entirely, right? It's not a different presentation or a different explanation of things or different explanation of questions or anything like that, but it's the little things. It's making adjustments on the little things that will cater better to doing it telephonically. But I think the longer you do face-to-face, the harder it is to make that adjustment. It's like you become so used to something.
Yes. I think practice makes perfect. Whether you're selling over the phone or you're selling face-to-face, I think, we were talking about the other day on with Chase. That was Monday on the podcast about getting to 10,000 hours, right? That's when you become an expert. That's really what it's all about, in my opinion, whether you're selling face-to-face or over the phone. I think repetition, practice, working with someone who knows what they're doing, sharing recordings with your upline, with your FMO, whoever you're working with, who can help train you. That's where you get to success. That's how you can really figure out either one, telesales or face-to-face. But, as we're kind of coming to the end of the podcast here, if someone showed up and put a gun to my head right now and said, Glenn, you can only sell insurance for the rest of your life picking one way, I'm definitely picking telesales.
Same.
I'm definitely picking telesales. I don't know how much more of what I've already said that I need to reiterate, but, the ability to market anywhere in the United States and sell, right here from my home or right in your local office, right? I think that's a huge advantage from the marketing perspective and ultimately the sales perspective. The efficiency of just that transaction, right? Not having, what if how many times I would miss a signature on an application and then I'm going back out to the house, have to reset the appointment. What a nightmare something like that is, which obviously just a phone call, right? Just a phone call or an email, right? If you are selling over the phone, hey, Susie, we were trying to process your application. We need you to sign this page, whatever. That's a huge advantage of telesales, right? Servicing the client remotely, selling the policy remotely, making more presentations in a day. The list goes on and on and on and on for me. So, just like that Zoom call fight from the pandemic, I'm still fighting. I'm still fighting for telesales.
Yeah. I think, will that be classified as your final thoughts, good sir?
That would be my final thoughts on face-to-face versus telesales.
I love it. For me, guys, my final thoughts are, still inside of the agency internally, we still do a mixture of face-to-face and telesales. It's probably 60-40 in favor of telesales. But the way we do it today is we don't go to homes. Anybody that does face-to-face with us, they're coming into the office. And I think that's a really good structure because then we're catering to both sides of individuals in terms of what their preferences. Like we can do whatever they want us to do, but except for going to their house. And so, but I do believe if you're looking to sell the most insurance you possibly can, if you're taking somebody that's proficient at telesales and you're taking someone that's proficient face-to-face, and I got to the point where as an agent, I became proficient at both. I'm a big believer that just because of the time-saving aspect of it, right? The efficiency of it, no windshield time. You're not going to be, caught up looking at spoons with a senior, shorter appointments, all of that, not having to go back out to the house to get a signature that you might miss or something like that, right?
Right.
All of those things alone make it so much more efficient, right? Gas, wear and tear on your car.
Yes.
Getting lost. Sometimes GPS screws up, like, where am I again? Like, all of those things are avoided with telesales. And I think telesales is the better way to go. It's more efficient. It's more compliance heavy. And so, it's not a perfect thing by any means, but I like the model that we've developed internally where we have that mixture. But if you don't have an office or anything like that, and you don't have the same situation as us, you're not far along as us. I had to pick one or the other. I would pick telesales, but again, like we've talked about, and like Glenn said, where you're at in your business, in your career might determine that too. It's not a bad thing if you're starting out and you need to get your feet wet and you're just terrified of making a mistake. Maybe go out into the field and get your feet wet, make some sales to start out. That's not a bad thing to do either.
I love it.
Appreciate you guys watching all the way to the end. If you are watching on a platform that allows you to do so, if you watch the replay, give us a hashtag team replay. We would appreciate it. If you're watching on a platform that allows you to leave a review, leave us a 5-star review. Apple Podcasts is a great one. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you watch us on YouTube. And if you're watching in the Facebook group and you're watching the same day, do not miss our virtual assistant webinar training happening later today. Glenn, what time is that happening?
2 p.m. Mountain Standard, which I don't know why we'd say stuff in Mountain Standard because nobody lives in Mountain Standard but Christian. But I guess we're trying to make it easy for Christian. Otherwise, he might miss the webinar, you guys. So 2 p.m. Mountain Standard, which is 4 p.m. Eastern today, this afternoon. How we built a 7-figure agency working with virtual assistants. You're not going to want to miss this. Even if you don't want to get a virtual assistant, maybe you just want to learn some strategies from the pros. That's essentially what we're going to be giving away.
Yes.
Tips, tricks, strategies, how you can work with someone remotely and have them help, leverage their time to help build your agency. That's happening today. If you're not already, we'll make sure the links drop below this stream. You can also go to VA. I believe the URL is va.hireheroes.com to register for this webinar. It's going to be awesome. We're expecting a lot of people. So yeah, check it out, you guys.
We'll see you guys over there if you end up attending, and we'll see you guys on the next podcast. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end and wishing you guys massive success in your business.
Happy selling.